Let's talk about the dangers in living a life void of the fruit of the Spirit of goodness. I want to give you some healthy expressions, some unhealthy expressions, and then I want to give you a couple questions to evaluate what you believe at the root about what it means to be good and have a goodness. When we looked at the biblical definition of the word goodness, we learned that goodness means an uprightness of heart and life. Some of the definitions of the word upright means elevation, sound, wholesome, and in accordance with truth. Goodness is integrity and generosity. Remember, this journey of being transformed by the renewing of our mind, living a spirit-led life, is about restoring God's original intended meaning and purpose to life. It means being a good person and living a good life mean nothing if they do not mean what God means. What is God's definition of good? I hear this a lot in our culture, like, oh, I just want to be a good person, or I don't need to believe in God as long as I'm just a good person. You don't even know what good means without God's definition of good. And the biggest deception of the enemy is, oh, that's just what you believe. No. Truth exists outside of what it is that we believe. We either choose to believe in line with the truth and set our life on a foundation of that, which exhibits very clear fruits, the fruits of the Spirit that we're going through here. We're learning to identify what that looks like. We want to be able to tell that we're living a life in line with the truth. The truth exists outside of what we think about it. It does not exist just because we believe it. Something is true independent of your opinion. Just because you believe that you're a good person doesn't make you a good person. You're a good person, or you have a goodness, an integrity, an uprightness of heart and mind because it's in line with God's definition, not because you think so. So, a life without goodness leads to selfishness, dishonesty, and moral compromise. When we abandon integrity and generosity and righteousness, or a rightness of thinking, our actions become self-serving. They create unhealthy relationships, and there's a large amount of inner turmoil. Without goodness, we risk falling into patterns of manipulation, apathy, and harm to others. Goodness anchors us in God's will, and it aligns our choices with His character, which protects us from the destructive consequences of self-centered behavior. Some dangers in living without goodness. We prioritize selfishness over compassion. Our focus shifts inward, prioritizing our own desires above the needs of others. This leads to a shallow, self-serving relationships that lack trust and care. Number 2, moral compromise. The lack of goodness makes us more likely to choose what's easy or convenient rather than what is right. Like, God has rewarded most my ability to not go along with things that are not right. Now, I may not always execute on that knowing in the right way, okay? I'm learning. I'm a human. But I know when some stuff is going down that is not right around here, and you will not find me there. Dishonesty, manipulation, and compromise erode our integrity and leave us with guilt and regret. Number 3, an indifference to others. Without goodness, we become apathetic to the struggles of those around us. Apathetic means a hardness of heart. You are unable to care about other people. You literally don't care. You're past feeling. Since God fundamentally is loving and He extends compassion, it disconnects us from God's call to serve and love others. Number 4, spiritual disconnection. Goodness reflects God's character. When we lack it, we move further from His presence and purpose, missing the peace and joy that come from walking in a righteousness or a rightness of thinking. Remember, peace and joy are also fruits of the Spirit. The joy of the Lord is strength. So joy is strength, and peace is the stability of mind. It guards our heart and our mind from intense emotions or from mental instability. I want to give you 3 healthy expressions of goodness, 3 unhealthy expressions of goodness. Remember, all this information can be found in the devotional 45 Days to Emotional Strength. And I will save these videos to a playlist as always for you guys to get what you need when you need it. Healthy expressions of goodness. Number 1, integrity in actions, honesty and transparency, even when no one is watching. Number 2, willing to help others through acts of kindness and care. We just unpacked the fruit of the Spirit, kindness. Being kind is not the same thing as being nice. Being kind is strength under control. You're choosing to exercise some control and respond in a respectful way, in a gracious way, happening in the situation. And number 3, commitment to righteousness, upholding God's principles and standing for justice even when it's difficult. Remember, this journey is about restoring God's original intended meaning and purpose. So what does God mean by justice? What does God mean by righteousness or having a right way of thinking? We cannot hijack God's word, use them for our own personal gain. That's manipulation, or what everybody without wisdom in explaining these concepts, that is witchcraft, okay? Manipulation is witchcraft. It's taking the truth and twisting it to fit your own narrative. The danger is that some of us have learned that the witchcraft is the truth. So there's a very real uprooting, tearing down, destroying so that we can build and plant truth. We have learned a tainted view of God's language by default. When we lack goodness, we compromise. So 3 unhealthy expressions of goodness: self-centered decisions, acting out of self-interest without regard to the impact on others. Number 2, dishonesty and deception, using lies, manipulation, or shortcuts to achieve goals. And people who are skilled in dishonesty and deception, that is actually what they lean on. They lean on environments where they can plant seeds of dishonesty, where they can manipulate and lie and pit people against one another, again, for their self-centered gain. Number 3, indifference to others, failing to notice or act on others' needs, fostering apathy instead of compassion. Remember, the definition of the word compassion means to bear with one another, to become responsible for. Having a responsibility means the ability to respond increasingly. So when we are responsible for another person, we are able to respond to what they need in that moment. With compassion, meaning we're able to sit with them in the uncomfortable situations, allow them to lean on our strength, to hold space for them if it's what they need, even when that trumps what we need. We're not getting what we need from other people, remember. We're learning to be grounded and live from a place of love and peace and joy and truth. So we get everything that we need from God, and then we are extensions of that to other people. Here are a couple questions to evaluate what you believe at the root of what goodness means and what it means to be a good person. In the next video, we're going to talk about the difference between goodness and corruption, how a lack of goodness leads to corruption, how corruption fuels the fruits of the flesh, and then practical steps for overcoming corruption.